but I promise that we will be swift and effective at this meeting today once we get started. Penny, do you need to allow anyone else in the meeting, or would you like for us to get started?
Good morning, everyone. No, I'd go ahead and get started. There doesn't appear to be anyone else in the waiting room.
Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks to everyone again for being on the call this morning, and I want to officially welcome you to the second meeting for the Higher Education and Post-Secondary Readiness Subcommittee. I will officially call the meeting to order, and I'll ask Penny to post our statement. And while she is getting that pulled up, it is a requirement for me to read the statement, so I will go ahead and do that. The Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on the opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on the topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in the new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by the committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. So now we will begin, and I will begin with a roll call. And out of respect, does everyone mind if I use first names? I'm going to move forward. Russ?
Good morning, everyone. I'm here.
Emily? David?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. Chrissy?
Good morning.
Good morning. Jeff?
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Claude? Logan? Lauren?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Senator Joy Hensley? Representative Tandy Darby?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Gordon? Okay, that concludes our roll call on today. Everyone should have received the agenda and also our PowerPoint presentation that we'll be reviewing today. But before we get into the PowerPoint presentation, from the previous meeting, we did have some questions. So we want to do the follow-ups from our first meeting. Those questions were, can we have more information about the formulas from other states? And the answer that we received is this resource is coming at the end of November and will be supplied to us at the end of November. So we will receive that information as well. The second question was, should dual enrollment be added on slide 13 of the PowerPoint deck? They wanted us to know that the PowerPoints are just informational and they're not inclusive. So anything that we want to add, we have the ability to do so. So dual enrollment can be considered as well. And number 3, how do we gather feedback? They have informed us that we should engage in conversations with our stakeholders in the community and ask questions and solicit feedback as much as possible with our peers. You will then bring this feedback to the subcommittee meetings and share those that information with us. So any questions about our last meeting or any of the questions that were brought forth to the subcommittee? Okay, so let's get started. Friendly reminder, to maximize, today we're going to maximize our experiences on the committee. So please make sure that when the PowerPoints are sent to us, we review those so we are ready for discussion. Also, it is strongly encouraged that you engage your stakeholders and your communities. If they're not coming to you directly, please pose questions so you can share their feedback as well during the discussions that we're having at each one of our meetings. And there are no limitations on who we can talk to or for how long we can talk to someone. Their voice with you is the voice that you'll be sharing for them at the committee meetings. They also want to remind us that our expertise as a member is very, very important. And we don't have to be experts in finance, but our contribution makes a huge difference. And that's why each one of us was selected in this role. So we can share our own feedback and what we look to see in the funding as well. So they also say it's important that we reflect as many viewpoints as possible to inform a funding strategy. So I think that gives us the lead way to just know that they're looking to us for our expertise, but they're also looking to us to have conversations with others so we can share their concerns and questions as well. So now, today, we're going to create a list of resources that we feel that are needed. And so this is our brainstorming question. So we did receive from David. He sent an email, David, I think it was on yesterday, from SCORE. And this was a report that they released. And he actually referenced several pages from that report for us to review. And also Lauren sent us an email this morning for some additional reports that she identified making the grade and also splitting the bill. And that was from Bellwether and one was from the Education Law Center. So some of you may have had a chance to view those reports, but may not. But now I want to open the floor up to any discussion items we want to reflect on at this time as some specific resources we would like to see funded at this time.
Yolanda, good morning, everybody. Again, I just wanted to remind the group that as you think about these, think of, and let me make sure you all can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just as you think about these and brainstorm these ideas and resources, think of those as, should this be a must-have? Would it be a should have, nice to have, or a long shot as we think about those resources?
Fantastic.
Hey, Yolanda and Penny, maybe I can just get us started with a couple things here that might be worth considering, particularly as it relates to specific areas of focus of this group. So if we're just thinking about like specific resources that we would want to see invested in, right? I think number one on my list would be college and career advisors to support college and career programming, college advising supports at the high school level, college application, FAFSA support. So that would be one. A second would be a certain number of high quality early post-secondary opportunities, which I think we would want to have that as inclusive of CTE courses and also high quality certification exams. I think we could talk about how many, but 4, 6, something like that in terms of the courses we want to be provided to students. And then a third would be a work-based learning or internship opportunity, which could mean obviously investing in supports to make sure that there's someone at the district or school level who's coordinating those kinds of experiences for students. So just 3 to maybe kick us off in terms of resources that would be particularly valuable in the space that I know this group is particularly.
And I will also add there that at our last meeting, we discussed our pyramid where we had the base and then we had our weights, our direct funding, and our outcomes. So as we just have this open discussion, we're really looking at some weights. I think that's what I'm hearing that will be assigned to the base as well. Then we may have some discussion on some direct funding and outcomes as well.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Oh, Yolanda, I was just going to say that those 3 examples that I gave, you could imagine that those could be, for example, incorporated into a high school weight.
Yes.
But just to kind of answer the specific question here, which is what resources would we like to see incorporated? Those would be 3 that I would suggest.
Awesome. Any other items for discussion?
So hi, everybody. Let me second David's 3. Those are from a workforce development standpoint specifically. But to your point, so I am very, very supportive of those. But Yolanda, to your point earlier about talking to different people, and I'm about to talk about something that I don't know a lot about, which never stops me. I hear the need for case managers as / counselors. And so I just throw that out there to the group and folks who are more fluent than I am about the need, because the social aspect of our kids in school today are a lot different maybe than they were before. And so let me put that out there for discussion, if nothing else.
Yolanda, let me step in on that one to kind of piggyback on Commissioner McCord. And I'll admit, I'm going to give this perspective, only because of my mother is a retired elementary school guidance counselor. And so I kind of vicariously saw that through her over the years. And I just want to echo what Commissioner McCord said. And I'm reminded of, and I don't know the literature in the policy arena, obviously, as well as this group, but a lot of those adverse childhood experiences that the body politic talks a lot about. Again, having kind of watched my mother intervene with students who are going through that in the public school systems in Jackson, Memphis, that seemed crucial. And and I remember, David, the score data that you guys showed a while back from DOE about even at 3rd grade, we see, reading score gaps and we see other achievement gaps, and you start thinking about potential reasons and causes for that. I mean, my mind goes back to what were those kids experiencing when they were younger, and having a case manager, a counselor, like Commissioner McCord said, that would not be at a ratio that would make it hard to really intervene, but really meaningfully working with students where necessary. That just strikes me as in the must-have category.
I can echo that as the Tennessee School Counselor Association representative. Our field, our profession has changed so much, even in the last 5 years, but particularly since the effects of the pandemic. And what we've seen is that starting at kindergarten, even pre-K, kids are coming in with a lot less ability to regulate emotions, the executive functioning skills that we're looking at for future development as they become, middle school, high school, onto their post-secondary options. And right now, the way the ratio stands, we're about 1 to 350 at the high school level. And that doesn't include college or career specific counselors. And then at the elementary school, it's and middle, it's anywhere from 1 to 900 to probably one of the lowest would be about 1 to 450. And many of our schools right now, we're collecting some data that show, because a lot of our schools do a universal screener at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and in the spring. And this screener looks at some of the risks that, like, we kind of separate the student body into tiers. Tier 1 would be low risk for social, emotional, personal issues. 2 is some risk, and then 3 is high risk. And typically you're looking at about 5 to 10% of your student body in a particular school would hit that high risk. And from counselors across the state, we're getting feedback that now has increased to about 20%. And at those ratios, counselors are not able to, as was mentioned, to get in there and really be a resource for families, for students, to get either referrals to more intense outside therapy, as well as also doing our job, which is the academic and college career part. So I agree, must have.
Any additional discussion items? Well, David, I will go back to you, to your original list. If you can share with us if you feel that these should be must-haves or should-haves or nice-to-haves or a long shot.
Good question, Yolanda. I mean, I would say in 2021, having college and career advisors, high quality early post-secondary opportunities that include CTE and certification and work-based learning opportunities would all be must-haves.
Okay.
But welcome other thoughts on that.
I would definitely agree, tying those together and giving students that opportunity to leave high school and continue their education with those skills. It is definitely, I see it as a must-have as well.
I agree also. And the college career advisors, that is something that actually is part of the training of licensed school counselors. So you don't necessarily have to have a separate, entity there. You can, if we increased our ratios, we would be able to give more direct support to students because the caseloads are smaller.
Okay. Any additional discussions items that we have today?
Yolanda, I think this goes without saying, and just want to mention this, right? But I mean, I think we would also, there's probably a whole set of things that are probably obvious things that we would also want as resources, right? So a full range of like regular high school academic programming, teachers, assistant principals, school counselors, totally agree. Transportation, maintenance costs, right? I mean, like these are sort of basic and obvious things, but I just want to make sure we're not overlooking those in this conversation too. So.
Okay. So that would definitely be in the base. And one of the things that I was just thinking about and would love to hear your perspective, because I am actually I have under my umbrella schools that are in distress counties and high-risk counties as well. I would love for those schools to get additional weights because of them experiencing, to me, some additional barriers. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree. And I was going to ask if equity in terms of funding is part of the scope of our committee too. Like making sure that we're looking at, I can take a school district in a wealthier suburb that has all of the things that we're talking about. I know of one specifically in Shelby County that and this was a grant funded program, but they're adding on a flight school, and they have, certification programs where, students are coming out as certified, nurse techs. And so it's more about how are we going to distribute these funds so that those distressed communities are raised up so they have the similar opportunities, because there's so much, schools aren't getting enough from the state, and then it really is reliant on the local, districts who are providing the additional funds, which is leading to, then these kids are supposed to either go on to career or college, and we don't have an equal opportunity for all of them.
I most definitely agree with that. And I would also throw in there the economically disadvantaged, or even schools in rural areas that have some limitations as well, which I learned yesterday was also called sparsity. Any other items from the subcommittee?
At that point, I mean, if we're thinking about different groups of students too, I mean, the ones that I would probably put on the list are economically disadvantaged students with disabilities,
Okay.
which could be particularly important as we think about college and career programming. Sparsity / rural, I think I totally agree with that, Yolanda. Concentrated poverty might be one to consider as well. And then I might suggest also a potential consideration for charter school students.
And students of color as well, because we have a pretty large achievement gap in terms of students of color.
I love that. And one of the things I wanted to mention that I did have a question on, that I know a lot of the schools that I serve, they have a problem recruiting highly skilled instructors or to their areas in the rural communities. So I'm not sure where that would fit into the discussion, but I've heard from several schools in their district areas to recruit highly qualified instructors in rural areas was becoming a vital issue. I don't want to say a problem, but just to attract them to come and live and work in rural areas sometimes can be difficult. And there may be someone that can speak more on that, but I have heard that.
The pay, the salary scale varies so much across the state. And typically what you would, like when I first started, I was in one county and it was a very low starting rate. And then I moved to another county that had more resources and was making much more. So my guess is the rural communities, because so much part of that funding comes from the local area, They're just not able to keep up with the larger municipalities, the urban schools, or the suburban districts that have more funding. So that's a huge, their salary scale is a barrier there for the rural communities.
So our talent is moving more so if for the, not necessarily for the money, but it definitely attracts a higher talent. So
right.
The rural schools are suffering from that. So I'm not sure where we would put that, but I definitely think we should include it in our discussion somewhere.
Yolanda, I have another one that'll take us in a bit of a different direction, I suppose. And I agree with a lot of what has been suggested so far, but I would also ask for, and I don't know whether this is a must or should have, but I think a lot about gifted students. And I know in a lot of districts, there is a sufficient level of support that they're receiving, that reflects their IEPs, and they've got a dedicated, gifted instructor for that. But also, again, my sense is, and I stand to be corrected if this is not the case from others who know more, but my sense is that a lot of districts struggle with that. And, nurturing excellence like that, nurturing those who have those innate skills that qualify them as gifted, that'll hopefully become, into higher ed and leaders in society. That's a crucial function, I think, too. And again, I don't know where this falls in the must or should haves, but being able to identify and nurture those students and giving them the resources that they would need when they do show as gifted, I think is really important to those families and those students. And that's a duty I think we also have in this form, is to recognize that and provide them those resources too.
Great. I love that idea as well. Okay. Any additional specific resources that we want to mention on today that have not been included, or we would like to share with the group? I will remind everyone that Penny is taking pristine notes for us today. So our next meeting, she will have a complete list of all of our discussion items. It may be at that time that we can go through the list again, and we can categorize those for must have, should have, nice to have, and also a long shot as well.
And Yolanda, at the end of every meeting, I'll do a recap of the notes that I take on the recommendations that the committee makes, and the next steps for the committee. I'll read that at the very end, just to make sure I've captured everyone's thoughts and recommendation on resources.
Awesome.
Yolanda, I mean, I might mention one other thing. I know we talked a bit last time, it was in the materials, about a component potentially being connected to outcomes as an area, and might just also sort of mention, as we think about resources, right, or potential areas, thinking about how we reward or support schools or districts that are helping students access college and career, particularly students who are higher needs. I just want to mention that as an area that we might want to spend more time on in the future, particularly related to this outcomes perspective, right? I mean, if as an example, a school or district's able to help more economically disadvantaged students move on to a post-secondary experience, or to a credential, to completing a credential, that could be a place to think about a small kind of outcomes piece.
I love that idea as well. And you made me think about something. During the pandemic, technology became a huge issue, I think for every school, but I know for rural schools as well, and having access for their students, which we tie directly into success. So I'm not sure if that's something that needs to be mentioned or included in the, as a measure or included in the base, but I do think technology is very, very important, and especially in teaching. So I would like to somehow formulate that into our discussions for our next meeting as well.
Miss Yolanda, if I could throw something out there too, just in my area here, we've had lots of families that have benefited from speech pathologists. And the overview there that I read, I didn't see where there was any type of funding or anything for that. And just to throw that out there, and like I said, that may not be, but there was lots of families that have benefited that from speech pathology up here. And just to throw that out there, that may be something that we can discuss at a later time there.
Oh, I love that idea. I really love that idea, because we're talking about student success and what will help make that student successful. And I agree with you that definitely that would be an asset for every student to have, if given the opportunity. Have we overlooked any suggestion? So it looks like we're at a good space. Everyone, I truly appreciate everyone's comments on today and the discussion items. I do know that at our next meeting, we should have more information to share, but as the chair, I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to support and help us brainstorm. So we will revisit this list and refine it over the next several meetings, and that is part of the engagement. So at this time, do I have any additional comments that anyone would like to add at this time? I definitely would encourage everyone to view the reports that were sent to us by our subcommittee members. I've gone through a few, and I'm learning a lot. And to me, this process is, not only about teaching, but learning as well. So if, Penny, I will turn it over to you for you to give us our updates at this time.
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions. David, you mentioned something about next steps in the future you'd like to think about. What was that? I missed it. I'm sorry. I should have stopped you then. Does anybody remember what David?
Yeah, he was talking about outcomes related.
Outcomes.
Yeah, just let's have a discussion about what we're trying, if we're counting or sending more money, what are the outcomes we expect? And how did I do, David?
Thank you for reminding me of what I said. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I hang on your every word, so that's why. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Yeah, agree.
So I'm just going to read over the list of notes that I took. We're not going to categorize them today, but I think you all got a really good start. So we began by sharing college and career advisors, work-based learning, coursework, and the number of courses offered should be considered. Several of you echoed counselors, the number of counselors. Someone discussed that distressed counties should have additional funding. Economically disadvantaged and rural districts possibly need additional funding. Districts with high number of students with disabilities should possibly have extra funding. Consideration for charter schools and students of color should be noted. Equitable pay for districts for school counselors and CTE teachers. Gifted students should also receive consideration for equitable resources. And then something for next steps David's thoughts about the outcomes. Representative Darby mentioned speech pathology consideration, and then Yolanda mentioned technology, access to all students. So that's a really good start. So what I'll do, oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just interject here real quick. I would say in your counselor's notes to also use the phrase case manager, because at least to me, it speaks to something a little bit different than maybe.
I actually have that down and I just skipped right over that. It was underneath something, Commissioner McCord, and it did case manager / counselors. Yes.
So, and that role would actually be by increasing school social workers. They tend to take over, more of the case management so that they're connecting families with resources that, economically disadvantaged, our English language learners, like they're kind of the hub of connecting. So if we had more, their ratios are even worse than school counselors. So more of social workers in the schools, you'd have that case manager effect.
I agree.
Penny, one just thing to add in the notes on the point about more courses in high school, just to be clear, I think when we think about a resource, I would certainly recommend a certain number of high quality early post-secondary opportunities that would be inclusive of career and technical education coursework, high quality certification exams, dual enrollment, right? But, but sort of specifically, 4, 5, 6 of those opportunities that would be potentially included in a resource that we'd be investing in. Just wanted to get a little bit of commentary.
All right. And I think that's it.
And I would also like to add for the distressed counties, at the at-risk counties as well.
Okay. So what I'll do, I will compile all of this in a meeting takeaways and recommendations report. I will send that to Yolanda to sign off on. And then once she agrees or makes any additions or corrections, then we will send it to T and EDU team, and then we will also send it back out to you. And I want to make sure that you all are finding the materials. As I get the materials, I'll post them in the following weeks, in the invitation for the following week. That's all I have.
Okay, sounds great. Our next meeting will be December the 8th, so we will have a little time to gather some more information and to continue our discussions on our next meeting. That meeting will be held in Teams again at 9 a.m. And that discussion will be categorizing and look at costing and feedback as well. So that if there's no other comments at this time, that will conclude our meeting on today, and I look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting. Commissioner?
Great job, Yolanda. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you so much. And y'all have a great, I'm going to call it a happy Wednesday. How about that?
Thank you, Yolanda. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.